Welcome to Crime and Justice Channel, where we dive deep into the most chilling and mysterious true crime stories. Whether it's shocking murders, unsolved mysteries, or gripping investigations, we bring it all to you. Drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from and what time it is, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really goes a long way in supporting the channel. Now let's dive into the story for today. It was January 27, 2017, a chilly, quiet evening in Kitsap County, Washington. The Careaga family home, nestled in the peaceful town of Bremerton, appeared to be just like any other on this cold winter day. The sky had turned to a deep purple as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the faint sound of wind rustling through the trees filled the air. Inside the home, there was the warm scent of home-cooked food lingering from dinner, as the family gathered for another evening of routine. A typical Friday night at the Careaga residence. John Derek Johnny Careaga, his wife Christale, their teenage son Jonathan Felipe Higgins, and Christale's teenage son Hunter Evan Shop were all inside, settling into their usual evening rhythm. It was a family like many others, busy with work, school, and the ups and downs of everyday life. Christale and Johnny, proud owners of a successful Mexican restaurant, Java Hut and Juanito's Taco Shop, had worked hard to make a living for their family. They had weathered their own struggles, but life seemed to be falling into place. On the surface, everything appeared to be normal. Christale had invited a few friends over for the evening, and Johnny had just stepped outside to take a phone call. He told the family he would be back soon, and they went about their evening. Johnny had no idea that this seemingly mundane night would be his last. No one knew that the quiet family home would soon be shattered by violence, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. As the evening wore on, an unsettling silence slowly descended. It was almost as if the house knew what was coming. The air seemed thick with tension, but no one could sense it. No one except Hunter Shop, the 16-year-old boy who had been sitting in the living room when he heard the first strange noise. It came from the garage, where Johnny had gone to meet someone earlier. Hunter stood up, confused, and went to investigate. As he approached the garage, he heard the voices loud, forceful, and unmistakably angry. Inside, the family was under attack. Hunter quickly dialed 911, his voice shaking with fear as he begged for help. "Please, they've shot my family. They're dead. Please come quickly." But just as his desperate cries echoed through the phone line, the connection was lost. The unthinkable was happening. A few minutes later, the Careaga home was in flames. When responders finally arrived, they were greeted by a scene far worse than they could have imagined. Christale, Hunter, and Jonathan were all dead, their bodies found in the house, lifeless, surrounded by the burning wreckage. The fire had been deliberately set, with large rocks thrown through the windows to fuel the flames. It was clear to investigators that someone had planned this. But there was one chilling detail that left everyone frozen in terror. Johnny Careaga was nowhere to be found. Was Johnny, the patriarch of the family, alive, or had he met the same fate as his wife and children? The investigators knew that the fire and the brutal murders were not the end of this horrific tale. What followed in the coming days would reveal the truth behind the chilling tragedy. But there was one thing everyone was desperate to find out. Who could have committed such an unspeakable act in this otherwise peaceful community? The discovery of Johnny Careaga's body in the isolated, remote area of Mason County was the catalyst for the chilling investigation into the murders of the Careaga family. The fire, the brutal killings, and the disappearance of Johnny had left everyone in Kitsap County reeling, struggling to make sense of the horrors that had unfolded in their otherwise peaceful community. But the discovery of Johnny's burned corpse was only the beginning of the twisted story that would soon unravel. What could have led to this horrific event? And who was behind such a brutal attack? As the investigation began to take shape, law enforcement officials discovered something even more unsettling. Johnny Careaga's death wasn't just random. It was calculated. Johnny had been targeted. But why? Detectives soon learned that Johnny Careaga was involved in something far darker than anyone had initially realized. Johnny, the respected owner of Java Hut and Juanito's Taco Shop, was not just a successful businessman. He had also been secretly involved in drug trafficking. For years, he had been transporting large quantities of cocaine from California to Washington, which he sold to customers in Kitsap County. This illicit business had brought him into contact with dangerous people, including members of the notorious Bandidos Motorcycle Club, a violent and well-known outlaw gang with a presence across the country. The truth was, Johnny had been living a double life, balancing the demands of his family and business with the hidden dangers of the drug trade. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a disturbing connection. Johnny's close friend, who had been helping him sell the cocaine, had stopped working with Johnny and introduced him directly to Robert Bobby Watson III, a full-fledged member of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. Watson, who had a history of violent tendencies, quickly became involved in Johnny's drug operations. The two men had a heated argument during one of Johnny's trips to California, with Watson accusing Johnny of cutting him out of a deal. This was the spark that ignited the chain of events that would ultimately lead to the brutal murders of Johnny's family. It soon became clear that Bobby Watson and the Bandidos MC were deeply entangled in the murders. Johnny Careaga had become a target, and his connection to the motorcycle gang had made him an enemy. But it wasn't just Bobby Watson who was involved in the plot. It was also his brother, Johnny J. Watson, and an associate named Danny J. Kelly Jr., a hang-around member of the Bandidos, who had once been close friends with Johnny Careaga. The trio, motivated by their grievances with Johnny and fueled by the dangerous world they inhabited, began to plot the destruction of the Careaga family. It was a violent, twisted plan that had been years in the making. One that would leave a family torn apart, a community shattered, and a series of unanswered questions. On the night of the murders, as the Careaga family went about their evening, the three men made their move. Johnny Careaga had stepped out of the house to meet someone, telling his family he would be back shortly. As he was in the garage, one of the guests at the house heard loud voices, three men arguing. The situation had escalated quickly, and Johnny was forced to confront the men who had arrived with sinister intentions. Meanwhile, inside the home, Christale Careaga, Hunter Shop, and Jonathan Higgins were caught in a nightmare that would leave them lifeless in a matter of minutes. As the chaos unfolded, Hunter Shop, in a desperate attempt to save his family, called 911, pleading for help. But his cries were met with silence when the phone line went dead. The killer, cold and methodical, smothered Hunter with a pillow and shot him in the head, before turning on the rest of the family. As the bodies of Christale, Hunter, and Jonathan were found in the burning house, the fire served as an intentional cover-up. It was meant to destroy the evidence, to make sure there was nothing left behind that could lead investigators to the killers. The twisted criminals behind the murders were trying to erase every trace of their involvement, but they had made one fatal mistake. The money was still there. A large sum of money, more than $50,000 in cash, was discovered at the crime scene, hidden in the master bedroom in a strongbox. This would be the clue that brought detectives closer to the truth. It was clear that the murderers had not just been motivated by personal grievances but by greed. Johnny's involvement in the drug trade had brought the danger to his doorstep, and now, the people he had once trusted were the ones who took everything from him. The pieces were slowly starting to fit together. The motive was clear, revenge and money. But even with this knowledge, there were still many unanswered questions. Why had Johnny been killed in such a brutal and calculated manner? And what role did the Bandidos Motorcycle Club play in orchestrating this massacre? The answers were buried in the lives of the three perpetrators, but they were not going down without a fight. As the investigation continued, law enforcement uncovered a chilling pattern. The Bandidos MC was involved in more than just drug trafficking. They had a history of using violence to settle disputes, and Johnny Careaga had been caught in the middle of their dangerous world. But who exactly was pulling the strings, and what was their next move? At the heart of the crime was Robert Bobby Watson III, the alleged mastermind behind the Careaga Family Massacre. Watson, a fully patched member of the Bandidos MC Bremerton chapter, was a man with a violent past and a dangerous reputation. Known for his erratic behavior and volatile temper, Bobby had been involved in the drug trade for years, and his relationship with Johnny Careaga had been both a business partnership and a friendship, until it soured. The catalyst for the murders was a dispute over cocaine. Johnny Careaga, who had been regularly bringing large shipments of cocaine from California to Washington to sell, had fallen out with his close friend and fellow drug dealer. The falling out led to Johnny being put in direct contact with Bobby Watson, who would eventually become the focal point of the crime. The two men, once friends, had a heated argument in the months leading up to the murders, with Watson accusing Johnny of cutting him out of the deal. This conflict, fueled by greed and a deep sense of betrayal, ignited the violent chain of events that would follow. The plan to kill the Careaga family was methodical and executed with cold precision. It was clear that the perpetrators had been familiar with the Careaga household, as they knew exactly when Johnny would be outside the house and when the family would be at their most vulnerable. The murderers had taken careful steps to ensure that the fire would cover their tracks, and they had made sure to remove any evidence that could tie them to the crime scene. As investigators pieced together the puzzle, they discovered that the murder was not just about revenge or money, it was also about control. Johnny Careaga had become too entangled in the drug trade, and his association with the bandidos had made him a target. The men who killed him and his family were not just motivated by greed, but by a desire to reclaim control over the drug network Johnny had been a part of. For them, the murders were not just an act of violence. They were a calculated strike to reassert dominance and eliminate a threat. On February 1, 2017, just days after the murders, the Kitsap County Sheriff's Department, in cooperation with federal agents, made their first move. They arrested Robert "Bobby" Watson III, the alleged mastermind behind the murders, who was found in a nearby Bremerton neighborhood. Bobby Watson, a member of the Bandidos MC's Bremerton chapter, had initially denied any involvement in the killings, but investigators quickly connected him to the crime scene. His fingerprints were found on evidence recovered from the Careaga house, and surveillance footage from the area confirmed his presence around the time of the murders. Johnny J. Watson, Bobby's younger brother, was arrested soon after. Johnny J. Watson, although not a full member of the Bandidos, was deeply involved with the gang and had been a willing accomplice in the murders. Investigators discovered that Johnny J. had played a crucial role in the crime, assisting his brother in the planning and execution of the murders. His involvement in the drug trade and connection to the Bandidos made him a key player in this gruesome act. But it wasn't just the Watson brothers who were arrested. Danny J. Kelly Jr., the Bandidos associate who had once been close friends with Johnny Careaga, was also apprehended. Kelly, who had been seen in police surveillance footage wearing Bandidos apparel, had once been like family to Johnny. But their relationship had soured after Johnny accused Kelly of stealing from him, and this resentment ultimately led Kelly to become part of the deadly plot. Kelly's testimony was key to understanding the motivations behind the murders, as he revealed the escalating tensions within the Bandidos and the growing animosity between Johnny Careaga and his former friends. As the arrests were made, the details of the crime began to come into sharper focus. The murder of the Careaga family was not just about drugs or money, it was also about power. The Bandidos MC had long been involved in illegal activities, including drug trafficking and violent crime. Johnny Careaga, once an ally, had become a liability in their eyes, and the murders were their way of reasserting control over their operations. But what was even more chilling was the lack of remorse displayed by the perpetrators. They had murdered an entire family with cold efficiency, using their ties to the Bandidos MC to carry out the crime without fear of retribution. As the investigation progressed, the authorities pieced together the final moments of the Careaga family's lives. Christale, Hunter, and Jonathan had been killed in a brutal and violent manner, with gunshots and knives used to ensure that there would be no survivors. Afterward, the house was set ablaze, the flames meant to destroy the evidence of the murders and make it seem as though the killings were the result of an accidental fire. But the fire could not erase the evidence, and the investigation would soon reveal the shocking truth behind the murders. The investigation into the murders of the Careaga family was far from over, but with the arrests of Bobby Watson, Johnny J. Watson, and Danny J. Kelly Jr., the next chapter of this horrific crime was set to unfold in the courtroom. The case had sent shockwaves through the community of Bremerton, Washington, and the nation as a whole, revealing the dark underbelly of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club and the dangerous ties between organized crime and the drug trade. But now, the perpetrators would face justice, though not in the way the public had hoped. The trials of the three men began in the spring of 2018, with the prosecution preparing to present a strong case against them. The evidence against the Watson brothers and Kelly was overwhelming. DNA and fingerprint evidence, surveillance footage, and testimony from witnesses who had seen the men in the area before and after the murders. The chilling details of the crime, how the family had been shot and stabbed, how the house had been set on fire to destroy evidence, were all brought to light in the courtroom. The prosecution painted a clear picture. Bobby Watson was the mastermind behind the murders, a man driven by greed, betrayal, and his desire to reassert control over his drug trade operations. Johnny J. Watson, though not a full-fledged member of the Bandidos, had played a crucial role in the planning and execution of the murders, and Danny J. Kelly, once a close friend of Johnny Careaga, had joined in, motivated by a personal grudge and a desire for revenge. Together, the trio had murdered the Careaga family in cold blood, believing they could eliminate a threat to their criminal operations and erase any evidence of their involvement in the drug trade. As the trial unfolded, the defense team tried to paint a different picture. They claimed that the Watson brothers and Kelly were victims of circumstance, that they had been influenced by the dangerous world they inhabited, and that their actions had been the result of a complex web of psychological trauma, addiction, and manipulation. They argued that the Bandidos had created a toxic environment that led the men to commit these heinous acts, and that the jury should take their backgrounds and troubled pasts into consideration when determining their guilt. But the prosecution was resolute, presenting a detailed case that highlighted the calculated nature of the murders. The fact that the men had deliberately set the house on fire to destroy the evidence, the fact that they had gone about their lives afterward with no remorse, was evidence enough that these were not crimes committed in the heat of the moment. The victims, Christale, Hunter, and Jonathan, had been killed in a brutal and systematic way, with no attempt to flee, no chance for survival. This was a planned execution, and the perpetrators had shown no remorse or fear afterward. In December 2018, the jury deliberated and returned with a verdict: guilty on all counts. Bobby Watson, Johnny J. Watson, and Danny J. Kelly Jr. were all found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder, arson, and burglary, among other charges. The court had not only convicted them for their roles in the killings of the Careaga family, but had also revealed the full extent of their involvement in organized crime. In May 2024, after years of legal battles, Bobby Watson and Johnny J. Watson were each sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for their involvement in the murders. Danny J. Kelly Jr., who had played a significant role in the crime but had not been the mastermind, was also sentenced to life in prison without parole. The verdict was met with mixed emotions. While justice had been served, the brutal nature of the crime left the families of the victims and the community with a sense of deep, unhealable loss. The aftermath of the Careaga family murders left a scar on the Bremerton community that would never fade. Friends, family, and neighbors who had once known Johnny and Christale Careaga, as well as their children, were left in shock, unable to comprehend how such a brutal act could have happened in their midst. The small family-owned business, Java Hut and Juanito's Taco Shop, which had once been a thriving part of the community, was left without its heart. Johnny and Christale's legacy was overshadowed by the senseless violence that ended their lives, and the community was left grappling with the loss of the family they had once known and loved. For the families of the victims, the trials and the sentences handed down to the killers brought some form of closure, but it could never erase the pain of losing their loved ones in such a horrific manner. The details of the crime, the cold-blooded nature of the murder, and the involvement of a gang with deep ties to the drug trade were all too much to bear. It was a story of greed, betrayal, and violence. A tale of how the darker side of the criminal world could seep into the lives of ordinary people, leaving nothing but destruction in its wake. As for the perpetrators, the life sentences handed down to them in the courtroom would ensure that they would never see freedom again. The Bandidos Motorcycle Club's involvement in the crime served as a reminder of how organized crime can infiltrate every aspect of society, even the most unsuspecting communities. Despite their convictions, the true extent of the Bandidos' involvement in the drug trade remained a dark secret, leaving the lingering question of how many more lives had been affected by the gang's illegal activities. The story of the Careaga family is a tragic reminder of the fragility of life, the devastating consequences of unchecked violence, and the deep, often hidden, impacts of organized crime on families and communities. Johnny Careaga's involvement in the drug trade had led to his tragic end, and the lives of his family were irrevocably shattered by a chain of events set into motion by betrayal, greed, and the dark undercurrents of organized crime. If you enjoyed this video, do subscribe to my channel for more chilling true crime stories.